NCAA President Mark Emmert is stepping down before the 2023 season gets here. What's that mean for Tennessee and college athletics overall? The first round of the NFL draft is coming up later tonight. When should we expect Tennessee Vols to be drafted? Logan Ward joins the Thursday show. All that and more here on Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into this edition of Locked On Vols, your team every single day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen every single weekday morning when you wake up on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props and odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. So we're going to discuss the change in leadership at the NCAA level today. We're going to throw out some who we would like to see take over for Mark Emmert, and then we're going to have some fun with it and talk about who should definitely not be considered for that job. But in reality, could you do any worse than Mark Emmert? So I'm not going to try to make this a pile-on segment. I know it's going to seem that way, but it just kind of is what it is. And then later on the show, we'll give you the latest projections and position grades per Mel Kiper Jr. and Todd McShay for Tennessee Volunteers entering the NFL draft. But with that being said, Logan Ward, welcome you back onto the show. Been a little minute. How you doing?
What's up, dude? Yeah, it's been I guess since basketball season, a little while ago. I was joking with you off the air earlier, and it was, Ward's back-to-back days. I get the Ward name in this town in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we're at. It brings a whole lot of clout. So my work uncle, I will say, Josh Ward, obviously on yesterday, as he is every Wednesday, and then you bring me on the day after. So it's gonna be I'm very happy for you because you're gonna get a lot of views this week. So you're welcome.
Yeah, more on Wednesday than on the Thursday show. I think that's safe to assume. But I do want to say, Mark Emmert, okay, he's decided to step aside. He and the board of governors and everything, the board just kind of mutually agreed to part ways. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to make this a pile-on segment, but it is what it is. Let's be honest with you. There has never been a worse time for the NCAA than it is right now. I mean, it's pathetic, right? It's 6 feet under. It does not have a beating pulse. There's no voice. What Mark Emmert, who has been the 5th president in NCAA history, he's held the same position for 12 years, was brought in 2010. What he's done and what he's placed his priority in over the course of the past 12 years just makes no sense. NCAA could be making a whole lot more money with the college football playoff. You did get it expanded, which is huge, but there's a lot of holes in that. Something you'll bring up here in a moment, I know you will, the hands-off approach. How he handled COVID, and again, that was so
laughable.
Tough.
Let's be honest, it was laughable.
It was comedic, yeah. But it's not like I could do any better, and I understand that. 2 years later, I'm going to point the finger. It was horrible. Essentially saying, conference commissioners, you do you. I don't want to be held responsible. I don't want to be held liable. I'm going to wipe my hands clean of it and sit back and just enjoy the crap show. And that's when Greg Sankey stepped up and really kind of showed his true talents. I think Mark Emmert, his leadership, what they placed priorities in has been just embarrassing, completely embarrassing. I think it was long overdue that he should have been stepping aside. But, what's your thoughts on Emmert and now the new direction and kind of where it could go?
So, so you're not going to pile on we got to call it what it is. The dude was an absolute clown. He should not have been running that thing. We both understand what a hard job that is. We both understand we don't understand. We can imagine how hard it is to be the president of literally anything, a country, a governing body like the NCAA, which is like its own little, it's basically its own little country, its own little world. It's a very hard job. I completely understand that, but it's just the hands-off approach that he took. In any line of work, Eric, that seems like the best idea. That on paper, in an interview, that seems like a really good idea. But when it comes down to it, you don't want the prisoners running the asylum. And that's essentially what he did ever since he became the president. You're saying, okay, Power 5 commissioners, I essentially work for you. You run it to the extent that it's long been said, when is the Power 5 going to break away from the NCAA? Now, you get the right hire, that might not happen. But it's an incredibly hard job. He was up against a lot of things: transfer portal, NIL, one-time transfer. All that stuff was fantastic for college athletics, but there was no clear plan long-term from him. I mean, we're seeing it now. Transfer portal, it's the Wild West. NIL, it's even worse. You don't really know what's going on. The NCAA comes out and says, yeah, this is affecting recruiting. You think? You think it's affecting recruiting? I guarantee you it is affecting recruiting. We see this on a daily basis. It's just a lack of a clear plan. His hands-off approach sounds fantastic, but when it gets down to it, it doesn't work well.
At the end of the day, if you're a commissioner of a league, of a conference, of a whatever, you're there to serve the owners. You're there to serve the chancellors, the presidents. You see it with Roger Goodell, who's Roger Goodell. I mean, he completely fumbled the concussion protocol and all that, and that'll stick with him forever. He's the best commissioner the NFL's ever had.
He is.
He's made so much money. Adam Silver, I couldn't agree with him any less on certain issues, but he's a good commissioner. You guys know my thoughts on Rob Manfred.
Manfred's a good one, isn't he?
Let's just step aside from that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter today, Gary Bettman, and then Rob Manfred is right behind it in terms of just worst commissioners ever. But point being, you're there to serve the people that keep you employed. That's what Mark Emmert was doing. Nobody wanted name, image, and likeness at that, university head level. Okay. They slow played that for years. It was criminal. While you continue to rake in millions upon millions of dollars on these 18 to 22-year-olds name, image, and likeness. It's awful. And so finally that's here, and that's great. The one-time transfer portal waiver or whatever, I think that's a good thing. Here's the issue though. You slow played all this for so long. Then you have them waived and back-to-back, just a couple of months span, right? So it's literally the wild, wild west in college athletics right now. And you're seeing Mike Krzyzewski say, I don't want any part of this anymore. Roy Williams literally say, I don't want any part of this anymore. Reports of Jay Wright saying, hey, I'll go coach the NBA. I'm not about this anymore. You're seeing more and more of this right now. And so you're seeing the old heads, the older generation, not liking what's going on in college athletics right now. And that's fair, honestly. It's because you went from, taking breaking balls to Ben Joy's 103-mile-per-hour fastball, little chin music, all in the span of 2 pitches. I mean, there's so much change, and it's because of the lack of leadership of Mark Emmert.
To the extent the government had to get involved.
Yeah.
Congress had to get involved.
The government's literally just sitting there and saying, okay, no, this is not how we're going to do this anymore. Okay. You need to stop taking advantage of these kids. So it's been bad. And then the way he dealt with COVID was just atrocious. And all this, Logan, he got a contract extension because he was still so bad at his job. And for slow playing all this for so long, he got a contract extension heading into last season where the NCAA buried it in a 75-page document where he got a $2.1 million raise as well.
It's one of the most laughable leagues, organizations that, it's one of the more laughable governing bodies in all of sports. I mean, I get it. So we're obviously big college football fans. I'm kind of glad the NCAA is not that involved with college athletics in terms of football, because we've seen, some issues go on in other sports. All Mark Emmert really cared about was the NCAA basketball tournament, because that's what the NCAA made all their money off of. And that's kind of, that's good. There's certainly a whole bunch of problems with that. But the most popular sport, our favorite sport in all of the world, college athletics, is college football. There's no leadership whatsoever. This next guy who comes in here, whoever that is, we can name our hot board later, needs to come in and say, okay, here's what's going to be the plan with the college football playoff, because this thing is going to expand eventually. I don't want to see a hands-off approach by whoever this next guy is. You need some clear direction, because right now, the hands-off approach is fantastic. Everyone wants a boss that is hands-off. The problem you have is you have Greg Sankey, who we can both agree is the most influential, most powerful man in all of college athletics, the commissioner of the SEC, clearly for, good reason. He's the most powerful. You get those guys going off in 5 different directions. Kevin Warren, during COVID, talks to zero of the other 4 Power 5 commissioners and says, hey, we're going to cancel the season. We're only playing Big Ten conferences, games only, which, happened anyway across the thing, but there was no clear leadership by Mark Emmert. As you said, he said, all right, boys, have at it. That can't work. It can't work, especially now. It cannot happen now. With the college athletics looks completely different now than it did 5 years ago. Kaner, imagine in the next 5 to 10 years, it won't even look like how it is now, even remotely close. So this next guy, it's a huge hire for college athletics. They got to get it right.
It absolutely is, because you can go from the way things are now, or you could go from the Power 5 breaking off, or you can go from the Power 5 turning into a Power 3 and absolving, all the other Power 5 conferences, and just completely taking its way away, separating itself, succeeding from the NCAA. I mean, that can realistically happen in the next, 5 to 15 years. Now, that's a wide time span. I get it. But I mean, that can happen. I mean, it can, if you get this hire wrong. And so while you're placing importance in all those stupid things Mark Emmert did in his leadership, you completely turn a blind eye on women's sports. I mean, the women's college basketball championships, the March Madness for women. I mean, some of the pictures that came from inside that bubble last year, not this past tournament, but the year before, just abysmal. I mean, it
looked
horrific.
like Fire Festival.
Yeah,
it looked
awful.
like the Fire Festival. It was awful.
And then you try to come in and play hero just because you got crushed by the national media, as you should. You do all that. Yeah. You change. You make sweeping declarations in college football to change the Kenny Pickett rule when he fakes a slide after he did it one freaking time. Yet there's faking injuries all across college football that's destroying it. Tennessee included. Tennessee does it too. And if you don't think Tennessee does it, you're wrong.
No, come on.
And also there's no clear, there's no answer for targeting and all that. I mean, those are just some things in college football. I get it, but you place your importance in stupid areas, whereas you could be making so much more money off the college football playoff and you're not, and you don't fix the game that you pointed out is the thing that drives the entire ship. So anyway, I know I said I wasn't going to pile on. I did. It just is what it is. Mark Emmert, his job was way harder than mine. I couldn't do it, but boy, I think just about anybody else could better than Mark Emmert. He was pathetic. Hopefully he has a good retirement. You got all the money in the world you want. Good for you. Enjoy time with your family. Scoot on out of here. Let's see if somebody can come in and truly save the NCAA. And that's where our conversation will pick up here in segment 2. Who were some guys that could step in? You and I both say Greg Sankey should be the first call. You and I both believe that will not happen. But who were some other realistic candidates? Who were some funny candidates that we think could do a better job than Mark Emmert? All that and more coming up here on Locked On Vols. But the ever-increasing makes of models, it's now impossible for your local chain of auto parts store to stock up all the parts that you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning that comes with the weight of the person behind the counter ordering the parts from their computer, from their warehouse, choosing, pulling up only the things that they have to offer? You have computers and you have it in the palm of your hand, and you can go check out at rockauto.com to fix the car the way you need to, right? You can save time and money while doing it as well with Rock Auto. Save up to 30 to 50, sometimes even 100% more on the same parts from the chain store or car dealership by viewing it at rockauto.com. All right. The website, it's so easy to use and navigate through, and you can find all the parts available for your car and your truck, and the prices always so reliably low for every single customer. They're a family-owned and operated business. They've been doing it online for customers, for the professionals, and the do-it-yourselfers for 20 years. That's my friends at rockauto.com. Go to rockauto.com and see all the parts available for your car and your truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit my friends at rockauto.com. Tonight begins the NFL draft, and for the first time ever, Locked On is hosting live coverage of this year's NFL draft in the studios from Dallas. Pick-to-pick analysis from the local team of experts and draft gurus. Tune in all 3 days beginning tonight for our draft team that'll guide you through every single pick, every single trade in real time. It all starts tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. It's available on the Locked On NFL and YouTube and the Odyssey app as well. That is the draft live coverage show from the Locked On podcast team. I'm Eric Kane back here on Locked On Vols. Logan Ward is with us here as well, as we're broadcasting via Zoom because Restream, well, you guys know Restream sucks. Logan, who should take the place of Mark Emmert? Again, if you're just joining us, Mark Emmert, going to step aside by June of 2023, or it could be before that if you find a president and he's in place. But mutually agreeing to step aside from being the president of the NCAA. The NCAA will be looking for its sixth president. Who should be on the short list to take over for Mark Emmert?
So the short list is a very obvious name, and people in the SEC, Tennessee know him very well. It's the first call has to be Greg Sankey. I mean, look at what he's done ever since he took over this league. He's been the conference commissioner for maybe 8 to 10 years now, Eric. I don't have his exact start date, but just, look whenever he started, the SEC network launched. They just signed a, $3 billion deal with Disney and ESPN to be the exclusive, rights holder for all their television product. I mean, he's got to be the right guy. My problem with that is, A, I love the SEC. I don't want to see him leave this conference. B, he just signed a, $2.9 million contract extension. I don't think that they're going to give him that much money to go run the NCAA. And if I'm him, looking at the way that this thing is going, he's a smart guy. He knows eventually the SEC, it already holds more power than the NCAA. Let's call it what it is. He's the most powerful guy in all of college athletics. He's a smart guy. He won't take it, but I mean, they'd be silly. Greg Sankey has to be the first call.
Yeah, I mean, he is the obvious candidate. He's the most, as you pointed out a couple of times, he's the most powerful man in college athletics because you are the conference commissioner of the most powerful entity in college athletics.
Rightfully so.
That is the Southeastern Conference. So I'm with you. He knows what's coming up. There could be a Power 5 versus the NCAA one day, and he can lead that sucker, right? And so he knows that. Plus, he will make so much more money leading the Southeastern Conference than he would the NCAA as a whole. So, yeah, I don't see that whatsoever, but he's got to be your first phone call because what he's done with the Southeastern Conference, and we all have our gripes, and that's fair, right? I mean, officiating this, that, Alabama gets uneven treatment, whatever, right? But,
yeah.
That's you have those gripes from every single school. As a whole, he has done a marvelous job. And so that's not going to happen. I'd say it's somebody who would have been great, and Will West brought him up on the starting lineup Wednesday morning. Kevin White. Formerly the longtime athletics director at Duke. He is the father of Tennessee athletics director Danny White. He would have been a great guy to take over, but he's retired. I doubt he wants to do that. Plus, he's kind of up there in age. Who would be, some realistic replacements potentially outside of Greg Sankey that we can maybe entertain, a direction that the NCAA might want to go?
So it's tough. I don't really know that there's one, right answer. So I'm going to tell you what I think the direction that they should go. I get the Kevin White thing. Obviously, you want someone who's been in charge, who's, potentially been a head coach at some level. I would probably lean more towards, if you're going to go get a head coach, it's a former head coach. It's going to be college football, but then we kind of see why did they actually get out of, coaching college football. It's a very real thing. Obviously with, Coach K and, Boeheim and, Jay Wright, we've all seen that. I want them to kind of go get a younger type of guy that says, okay, right now, he doesn't have all the answers. But as we said, NIL, transfer portal, this thing is going to look a whole lot different. It looked different from 5 years ago. It's going to look a whole lot different 5 years from now. I want to see new guy, whoever it is. I hope it's a younger guy that kind of has a direction of where this is going to go. If NIL, there's going to be a major market correction, I believe, within the next year or two in terms of NIL. I don't think you're going to be seeing these, college athletes be getting, $8 million deals when they haven't played one down of college athletics yet. There's going to be some market correction there. So I want to see them go hire a younger type of guy that's going to have a plan long term, because I think, Eric, if you get this hire right, let's say it is Greg Sankey. So let's go with that for a second. The Power Five is not going to split away. So with this hire, if it is the right guy, as we both said, it's not going to be Greg Sankey. I would be floored if it is, but he should be the first call. If you get this right, and the Power Five commissioners, the Power Four commissioners, if Greg Sankey loves this hire, you're not going to have the, SEC, ACC, Big 12, all the Power Five conferences break away in the next 10 years. You got to get the right hire. I think it needs to be a younger guy who has plans down the line to fix the problems, to correct the issues that we're starting to see being taking place in college athletics.
Yep, that's kind of the direction that I was thinking as well. You need a 180. I mean, again, everything that Mark Emmert did, the way he went about it, everything, just do the opposite because
it's outdated. It's old and outdated.
And it was just so bad. It was a horrible model. Again, the way I talk with people that say they don't like the transfer portal, they don't like name, image, and likeness. That's fair, but it's not going anywhere. Okay, it's literally here to stay. And if you don't jump on board, you're going to get left behind. I mean, look at the way Tennessee is handling name, image, and likeness compared to Ole Miss. Therefore, you get the reactions of Lane Kiffin, who's crying to anybody who will listen, and no one's listening because it's just Lane Kiffin, right?
Right.
And he's just mad because he's not at Southern Cal anymore, or not at Alabama, or not anywhere else. Purdue is a school that's just now beginning to lay the groundwork for a collective. It's like Tennessee's had a collective in place for like a year right now. Like, what are you doing, right? So get on board or get left behind. It's the
model.
Nick
Saban thing. It's the Nick Saban. He hated up tempo offenses. He hated no huddle offenses. He said, okay, if you don't want to do this, I'm going to beat you. He said that with NIL a couple weeks ago. You have to continue to evolve, and that's the Nick Saban effect. You got to get a guy that's going to do that.
Yeah, he hated the transfer portal. He advised against the transfer portal. It's passed. He's going out there, and of course, Alabama's getting the best of the best, because why wouldn't you want to go play for Nick Saban and win championships? So who are some people that absolutely should not get the job? I heard you and Eric Ainge talking about it on Wednesday's Eric Ainge show, and don't get me wrong, I don't chuckle often. I giggled a few times. I laughed. I heard you guys say Paul Feinbaum.
That'd be a lot of fun. Come on. Okay, so I'm just looking for fun content, okay?
Yeah.
That's all I want. It's going to be a train wreck no matter what it is, if it's not Greg Sankey. If we're going to have some fun here, Paul Feinbaum would be an absolute blast. We had some people throw out a Philip Fulmer. That'd be a lot of fun. Steve Spurrier would be a lot of fun. But I also kind of see, Steve Spurrier sitting there, first meeting up in Indianapolis with the NCAA, governors or whatever the heck they are. He's just kind of like, all antsy, and he's like, all right, let's go play golf. All right, let's go. So, but like, hey, I'd be for it. It'd be hilarious.
So the name you brought up there it's pretty good. And, I don't want to offend any of the listeners and viewers because I love you guys, but you guys know my thoughts on Philip Fulmer, the athletic director. Was not good.
That didn't work out great.
You need to separate, in my opinion, Philip Fulmer coach, Philip Fulmer athletic director. He can still be thought of and be your guy, and that's completely fair. That's awesome. And Tennessee fans should love Philip Fulmer. Still to this day, you should love Philip Fulmer. But Fulmer, the AD, was not good. Just point blank wasn't. The fact that Ray Barnes is still your head basketball coach is because of Randy Boyd, not Philip Fulmer. Anyway, he did hire Kelly Harper, which turns out to be looking like a pretty good hire. But pretty much everybody else. That'd be a good
one. I haven't thought of Randy Boyd.
Randy Boyd would be a great one.
He's a businessman. He would know what he's doing.
That's kind of the good one. It's kind of the transition I was going in. Randy Boyd, a businessman, successful businessman running University of Tennessee right now. To say the least. So he's got his hands in so many different pockets as well. And so very well versed. Randy Boyd would be a good one, but Phil Fulmer is an interesting one. If you want to be funny, of course, Spurrier would be funny as well.
We had someone bring up Peyton Manning, but that kind of goes back to, why would you want him to be the head coach at Tennessee? Because every time Tennessee has an opening as a head coach, we'll just go hire Peyton Manning. But when it doesn't end well, what's his legacy gonna be? So
again, it's the whole thing. Like, okay, when they call a play on 3rd and short that you don't agree with, if you lose 2 games in a row, what's your exit strategy here, right? How you gonna? Again, look at Philip Fulmer. Like, there's some people that don't like him anymore because of the way he, it happened with the athletic directing situation. So, T. Martin was a part of the staff that got fired for cheating. Some people might not like T. Martin anymore. Again, it's a delicate situation. Scott Frost, people hate him at Scott Frost, and he could do no wrong 3 years ago.
So I kind of had a little funny one, and this is, I don't want to get, too political, but hey, I'm just here for content, so let's do it. So there's a presidential election for the president of the United States every 4 years, right? The winner of that election is the new president, okay? The runner-up becomes the NCAA president. I solved it. I fixed it.
Well, because
here,
because, can you do much worse than what's already been in place?
You can't.
And you can make the argument from whichever side of the aisle you're on in both the NCAA and as the United States president. So it kind of is what it is. Mike Leach is a name I've heard being thrown out there. I mean,
That'd be a fun one.
Now, first of all, he's smart enough. He's smart enough to. He's one of the smartest men, in my opinion, in college sports. But he's crazy. He's a lunatic. So if you want that, then sure. Mike Leach is one I heard being thrown out there. Who are some other ones who should definitely not get the job whatsoever? I heard you guys talk about LSU's and Bruce Pearls and Will Wade. I mean, yeah, just whatever.
Just more fun. Condoleezza Rice was one that got thrown out that, might hold some ground. So she has a little bit of a background in terms of being around college, athletics, former Secretary of State. Her dad was a college administrator. She was on the first ever college football playoff committee, which didn't make a ton of sense, but the committee is definitely a question, in and of itself. I mean, she's a name out there as well. I kind of want to see them go, a lot younger to, evolving. She's not a bad name.
Going younger will not happen. I mean, look, there's an 80-year-old president of the United States right now. Going younger will never happen. Okay. Oliver Luck is a guy that will get a look, I'm sure, because he's commissioned pretty much any conference that's been out there. He is the perfect example of failure makes you who you are. He has failed so many times, but I mean, he continues to get job after job after job. And because he's good at setting things up, he's a good relationship guy. He's good at making money. I think Oliver Luck would be a guy that they look into as well. Anybody else here as we kind of wrap up this subject and move on to the balls in the draft that you think should get a look or who should not get a look? I mean,
guys that, just still kind of being kind of funny. I mean, I think that Nick Saban, if he was not the head coach at Alabama, would do a fine job just because I think you almost need someone that has the experience of running this thing to go to the next level to potentially take on the whole entire thing. But I don't have one person. I'm kind of coming around to that Randy Boyd idea, though. I don't think he'd do it because he makes too much money. He's too worried about building the stadium here in Knoxville for the Smokies, which is fantastic. And obviously being the president, he has an absolute blast doing that. But that's a name. That's a good one. I like Randy Boyd.
I think that one's a really, really good one as well. So something to monitor over the course of the next, I don't know, probably year and a half.
Another year of it.
Yeah. We'll not a year and a half, another year of it at the least. Hopefully it'll be soon. I truly do. I mean, I hope Mark Emmert enjoys retirement with his family. Of course, he's, spent his entire adulthood serving in some capacity of the NCAA or college athletics. So right off into the sunset, you do you. Get on out of here. You should have left a couple of years ago, and let's move on. So Tennessee Vols in the draft. Nobody's going to be drafted tonight. Likely nobody's going to be drafted tomorrow night, right? Who could be drafted first? What are the position grades? What are people saying about Tennessee players in the NFL draft? That's coming next right here on Locked On Vols. Got a couple minutes left here on this edition, your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Had a fun conversation. Got Logan Ward here with us as well, talking about Mark Emmert stepping aside and who could replace him as NCAA president. Will that affect Tennessee? It could. Maybe if Greg Sankey steps up and takes over that role, but we don't believe that will happen, but he should absolutely be the first phone call. So it's been a fun show so far as we move on, and tomorrow will be a fun show. We'll react on the first round of the NFL draft and kind of the best available. How far down the list are some volunteers heading into day 2 of the NFL draft, that being week 2 and week 3, all that and more. So that's what you had to look forward to coming up on Friday's show. But right now, here to end a Thursday show, I want to discuss kind of what everybody's saying about Tennessee players in the NFL draft. I think it's a safe assumption that 4 guys will be drafted, and I think they're all going to be very, very close to one another, anywhere from the tail end of 3, which probably not from the tail end of 3, probably to mid 5, you'll see 4 Tennessee Vols drafted, right? And they could go in any different which way direction that you can possibly think of. I've seen one mock that has Matthew Butler going first. I've seen another mock that has Alante going first, another mock that has Bayless going first. I mean, it's ridiculous. And some people think Cade Mays will go first. I think Cade Mays will go last, but overall, Tennessee players in the draft, kind of what's your expectation, Logan? And no one's going to be a high draft pick, but it's good to see about 4 guys get drafted for Tennessee. That should be the norm every single year.
I mean, what was the stat maybe, 3-4 years ago? It was like Tennessee hadn't had a guy drafted in the last, 3 years. And that happened. I guess that trend just got broken a couple of years ago. Of the 4 guys you mentioned, Matthew Butler, Velus Jones, Alontae Taylor, and Cade Mays, out of those 4, if you ask me who's going to have the best pro career, I think we might see a little bit of a situation that we saw last year with Trey Smith. That might be kind of direction. I say Cade Mays because he wasn't really playing in the position he's going to play at the next level. So I would probably put my money on him to have the best pro career. A guy who I would take first, just because I think the way the game's going offensively, and you know exactly who I'm going to say whenever I said offensively, look at what the 49ers did in ways with Deebo Samuel. I think a team's going to fall in love with Velus Jones' abilities to, return kicks, return punts. He's a very good receiver in the slot. You might be able to hand it to him at the backfield. He's definitely not Deebo Samuel, because Deebo Samuel is one of the best players in the NFL. So let's not put that pressure on him. But you understand what I'm saying. He has that type of skill set. For that reason alone, I think Matthew Butler is going to be the first ball taken. I really do, because I think I like him to produce a lot earlier at the next level than a guy like, Alontae Taylor or Cade Mays or Velus Jones to a certain extent, because you got to grow within an offense if you're Velus. But if I was picking a guy who I would pick first out of these 4 names, for all I said about Deebo and his comparisons to Velus Jones, I would pick Velus Jones, because I would fall in love with literally everything an offensive coordinator could do with him. It's endless.
I agree with you, but the cons against Velus Jones is he's going to be 25 years old.
He's an older guy.
And he played 6 years of college football. 6 years. Think about where you were 6 years ago, Logan. You were probably in middle school. That was so long ago, right? And I heard the stat earlier today. You've got Lamar Jackson, who has done so much in the league already in 3 years, the highs, the lows, winning Rookie of the Year, MVP. He's just a couple months older than what Velus Jones Jr. is right now. Velus Jones is older or right on par with Joe Burrow. These guys have been in the league for years, and Velus is still that age. So again, it's not a first-round grade. You're not taking him in the first round. So, you take a flyer on him in the 3rd or 4th, those mid rounds. That's doable, right? The 4th or 5th, excuse me. But I agree with you. Velus Jones is a guy, he's a running back in a receiver's body. He can absolutely fly. He's a 4.31 guy. Learned how to return punts. Didn't do that at Southern Cal. Learned how to return punts. He did well at Tennessee. Of course, he's a great kick returner, and he can be your 4th or 5th wide receiver on a roster if he grows into that, in my opinion. He can play outside. He can play inside. I like Velus Jones as well. Matthew Butler, in my opinion, will be the first drafted, because he's a guy that can play 12 years in the league. He might not be a starter for you. He might be a rotational guy, but he's a guy that's going to just last. And I think that showed how he came into Tennessee, how he's leaving Tennessee. Alontae Taylor is the guy I had the most questions about. I don't know.
I do too.
Do I think he's fast enough to play corner in the National Football League? Let me rephrase this. Do I think he's fast enough to play man-on-man coverage in the National Football League? I don't, because I've seen him burn so many times. Is he fast? Yeah, he's fast. He's so fast. Did teams game plan away from him? Yeah, they did. I had the most questions about him. And
he's also been burned a ton.
I know, yeah, and it just is what it is, right? A quarterback is a lot like an offensive lineman. You only see them, you only call out their name whenever they get burned or whenever something bad happens. So it is what it is. Cade Mays, durability will always be a question for him. Can you stay on the field long enough to do anything? Because you certainly, you missed a whole lot of time at Tennessee in 2 years. So here is what the experts are saying in terms of the position grades heading into tonight's first round draft. Todd McShay, these are position rankings, rather, not grades, rankings. Matthew Butler is the 9th rated defensive tackle per Todd McShay. Alontae Taylor is the 15th rated cornerback per Todd McShay. Velus Jones, the 17th rated wide receiver. Cade Mays, the 17th rated offensive guard. Mel Kiper Jr. has Matthew Butler at 8 at defensive tackle, so up 1. Velus Jones at 16th at wide receiver, so up 1 from Todd McShay. Cade Mays, the 17th rated offensive guard, so the same as Todd McShay. Then you get to Alontae Taylor. Got Alontae Taylor as the 11th rated safety entering the NFL draft. Can Alontae Taylor play safety in the National Football League?
I think his body might fit safety a lot more than corner. And I mean, maybe that has something to do with skill set, as you mentioned, and we saw him get burned a few times at Tennessee. Now, he'd certainly improved a lot from his freshman year because he played. I mean, he was a 4-year guy. He played and started in a ton of games. He never dealt with major injuries that really kind of kept him out. So I think he's going to be durable there. But I mean, I just don't think he has the speed and the ability to play man-to-man coverage against the receivers he's going to go against in the NFL. That's always been the question of me. In my opinion, of these 4 guys, ranking in order of guys I would take, I would have Velus Jones 1, I would have Butler number 2, I would have Cade Mays number 3, then I'd have Alontae Taylor, because there's so many questions, and I just don't think what he has shown, what we saw at Tennessee in the position he's going to go in the draft as, having him as a safety is interesting to me because I think that could work. But just based off him being a corner, what we've seen for 4 years, I would have him 4th.
So many fans, I say so many, some fans were just getting frustrated with the defensive back positioning last year. First of all, Alontae was your best one by and large. Theo was fantastic. I recognize that. Alontae Taylor was your best one back there this past year. And I mean, he's a good player. He's got everything you want in the defensive back. But so many fans are just getting so frustrated with the safety play and saying, well, just move Alontae to safety. Just move Alontae to safety. I mean, you can't do that as a senior. You can't do that midseason. That's not a switch you just go and do, right? I mean, sure, it's good to be versatile, but you're not going to do that with Alontae Taylor. But maybe this is an opportunity. I view Alontae Taylor as a guy like Bryce Thompson, who was a cornerback at Tennessee and a real good one. Playmaking ability in terms of consistency was lacking. Alontae is much more consistent than Bryce Thompson, but playmaking, that ceiling way higher. He's a safety right now. I mean, he was on the active roster a couple of games from the New Orleans Saints as a safety. Can Alontae do that in training camp? Is that your sticking point? That's something I'll look out to. So we'll see. He cannot play strong safety.
These guys,
hold on. You can't play strong safety. He can't be he can't be up and around the line of scrimmage whatsoever. Because that's not his skill set. But can he roam over the top? Sure. And that versatility. What were you saying?
So of these guys, I mean, would you agree with me that maybe Cade Mays is probably going to have the best, 10-year career down the line? I'm kind of with you. I think Matthew Butler will play a lot. I think in terms of success, and whenever we kind of go back, 10 years down the line, said, okay, of these 4 guys, who was the best?
Of these 4 guys, if I'm rating it right now, if we're going back, 15 years and looking back, if I rank them, Matthew Butler would be number 1. Alontae would be number 2. Velus 3.
Really?
4.
Injury concerns.
Yeah. And to be completely honest, I mean, he's a good player. His versatility is going to help him. He'll make a roster. He'll be fine. But he was not that good at Tennessee. Let's be completely honest about it. He was playing out of position. I get all that. He lost a lot of weight to play tackle heading into this new offensive scheme, and all that's great. But what he was at Georgia as a freshman and sophomore, he was not at Tennessee, and injuries had a lot to do with that as well. In conclusion, and I agree with you here because you've been saying it, Velus Jones, in my opinion, highest ceiling, biggest potential to be a playmaker. But if I'm taking a guy that I'm putting $100 in a guy that will last and be a guy in the National Football League 7 years from now, it's Matthew Butler. I don't think twice about it.
I just think someone's gonna. I think clearly we have seen colleges, NFL commissioners, GMs and coaches fall in love with what Velus Jones can do with the ball in his hands. Someone is gonna get a very good player right there in the 3rd, 4th round if he goes that high.
I don't think anybody will be drafted in the 3rd round, but if anybody does, it'll be Matthew Butler. He's been mocked there a few times at the very end of the 3rd round, so something to pay attention to. I think all these guys will be drafted by midway through the 5th round. All right, Logan Ward, thanks so much for hanging out with me here today, and I'm sure we'll get you back on the podcast someday when I don't feel like programming it, okay?
Hey, anytime. I tell you what, it's a lot better to stay here, 8:30 recording this and not having to go straight to bed to wake up at 7 the next morning.
Yeah, so you're welcome for that. All right, he is Logan Ward. I'm Eric Kane. As you listen here to Locked On Vols, Thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. The draft is here. Check out Locked On the NFL Draft, that podcast, making your second listen this morning and tomorrow as they preview and recap all that will be tonight's first round action of the NFL Draft. That's on the Odyssey app. Make that your second listen right behind Locked On Vols, which is your first listen each and every morning. For Logan Ward, you can follow him on Twitter at LoganWard98. I'm at _Kaner, and this podcast at Locked On Vols. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen. We'll do it again tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.